All right, so the Anvil Paladin, which I think has a pretty cool silhouette. Looks like a Valkyrie that worked out. It's got, I think, a nicer look than the Valkyrie because it doesn't have that giant cargo bay in the back. But it also, when you look at it from a different angle, it has like this giant missing section back here. And I think that, to me, makes it look a little bit like the Scorpius. So I get a little bit of Scorpius from this with the split section in the back there. The front is kind of like tapered down into the front with the glass in the side. You got some strong shoulder shapes there. And then also you got the railed turret here. So you can see that the turret's on the bottom in the Scorpius picture. Sorry, I'm kind of blocking it. But the turret's up on the top on the Paladin. But this ship to me feels like a large Scorpius. It's got the turret on top. It's got the wing swept back. It's our little gigantic space salmon. I also think the cockpit's pretty cool. This is a cool orientation to sit in. So the Paladin is a gunship, a heavy gunship. It's about 53 meters, which is a little bit longer than the Redeemer, I think. So it's coming in basically to take the space of what the Redeemer was changed to be. The lore here says Anvil Aerospace is on the front line of humanity's defense, forging the weapons that keeps Earth systems safe from the dangers outside and within. Continuing tradition, the Paladin spares no one, cutting down threats in a relentless hail of laser fire. So, gunship, it's got 2 guns on the sides here. Those are size 4s. These can be piloted either by one of your co-pilots here in the seat, or they can be piloted by the actual pilot when there's nobody in that seat. Looks like they can probably rotate around in a circle, but not shoot out at a right angle to the ship. So you got some decreased range there. I'm not sure how valuable it would be to have somebody on those turrets when you are flying around, but I think this fits really well in that 3-person range. I know people are saying 2 people, a pilot and a gunner, but I think you're going to want to have a redundant gunner who can both be doing the gunning and also the engineering, because with a ship like this, a gunship, at any point where things get heated up, you're going to take damage. And the most important time to have an engineer is when you're taking damage. So I think you would rather have your gunner stay on this big ass gun here than run around repairing components, because you could still control these as the pilot. So I think this is a good 3-person ship. 4 people works as well. Obviously, you can keep people on the turret and also do the engineering, but there's choices here. And that's one of the things we went over. Me and Ferrister just had a good podcast about this. We talked about the Anvil Paladin for like a good half hour. We also talked about the master mode changes. It's on the 2nd channel if you want to check it out. But I think this ship represents a solid ability for these ships to scale for the party. You could go out in this ship with you and a friend and do some pretty decent damage. You could do some fun stuff together, but it doesn't stop you from doing that, while also making sure that as you add more people, there's definitely your returns are growing. That 3rd person is going to be able to sit on the turret and be a lot more effective while you fly and make sure that you're getting the right angle for your turret gunner. That 4th person is basically a redundant turret gunner and an engineer, which can keep your ship completely up to shape while everybody else stays on the turrets. So you can both handle this ship in a small group and get a lot out of it in the actual group it's meant to have. For $260, I would say get this in game, but it's a military ship. This is a military ship with a whole bunch of firepower on it. It's going to cost more because that stuff is, it's a military tax. The 2 important things to touch on here, I think, are how this compares to the Redeemer. Now, I'm not a huge, I am not a big combat person. I'm also not a huge ship person. Like, you're not going to find me coming up with all the hottest takes and the best advice on which ships to buy. But I can tell you that the Redeemer and the Paladin are probably aiming at 2 different markets. Here you've got the Redeemer, which has, I guess it has some storage on it, yippee. But this is more of a kind of nimble get in, get out kind of thing, in my opinion. I actually think this would do better in space when you're going into space stations, abandoned space stations, and things like that. You have the guns to protect yourself, but this can also kind of act as can this act as a bit of a drop ship? I know it was supposed to somewhat be. But yeah, the Vanguard Hoplite took that role. So I guess there aren't jump seats in this. But I think the Redeemer is a bit of a more, at least supposed to be, something that is meant to be faster and more kind of in dogfights, whereas the Paladin feels like something that's a little more about controlled assaults on actual locations. More focused on VTOL, on getting an atmosphere. The fact that the turret on this ship can go top and bottom gives you the versatility of being able to attack locations themselves. So I think it does lend itself a little bit more to that kind of variability. But they're still kind of similar. And that's why I'm saying, like, I'm not the master that's going to tell you how to change. But I do think there's a space for both of them. What I'm less interested in discussing, but are things like this, which we already talked about a little bit. But the idea that if this did have guns that could not be controlled by the pilot, I know I said that I like that two people could really use this effectively. I don't think that would have been a problem. And the idea that it would have been forcing multi-crew for players is, call it a hot take, curse me in the comments, whatever you will. We got flack for this in a recent podcast clip, but like, I think that people really need to accept that there will be things in the game, as there should be things in every game, that don't quite fit the gameplay you're looking for, and that's okay. Obviously, CIG can't leave anybody behind. I mean, they shouldn't make a game for everyone, but they should make a game that can be played by anybody in terms of solo or gameplay, but you gotta have ships that are better in multi-crew situations. And forcing multi-crew, I'm going to call it encouraging multi-crew. I don't think it's forcing. You could still use the ship with one or two people, even if the guns aren't controlled by one person. Go take the ship, park it out somewhere, turn the shields on, use the turret, whatever. You got a mobile turret. But it's not forcing multi-crew. It's just taking advantage of the facilities a ship has. And I think allowing a ship to just be a ship that can be flown around and other people can use to shoot, like the Hammerhead per se, is entirely fine and should be existent in the game. Not everything should be like that, but some things should. That's just the way it is. Like, make gameplay for the people who want to experience that kind of thing. Although, you know, it should have its benefits. If you can't shoot with the guns as the pilot, you should be able to do something that the people who are flying ships in which you can shoot as the pilot can't do, you know? So theoretically, let's say those weapons were the same, or if this ship was a little bit smaller maybe, and had like similar shields and stuff to the Scorpius, but it was still multi-crew. That would be a way to differentiate it from a Scorpius, is to say, you're not going to have access to those 4 size 4s or those 4 size 3s. Somebody else has to fight those. But you could take a Scorpius out, then you will have access to it and still be able to fly the ship. It's like those kinds of subtle nuances when you're balancing the ships that I think matter. And right, like it's not like they should stop making solo ships. I think that's one thing that everybody can agree on. Even if they're focusing on multiplayer gameplay, that doesn't mean they should stop making ships that are made for solo players, like the Intrepid or the Guardian. I mean, it's a heavy fighter, so it'll probably be a 2-seater, but it's still mostly made to suit solo style or solo scale gameplay. Tons of stuff like that. The Prospector, the Vulture, the Cutter, the Avenger, the Hull A, then the Nomad, the Vanguard, the Gladius, the Eclipse, all the things. The Ares. There's so many ships to do what you would like without having to deal with multiple seats. What else do they talk about here? I didn't even get through the whole sales page. 2 dual remote turrets safeguard the Paladin's flanks, preventing dead spots and ensuring an all-around firing arc. Okay, so they can rotate all the way around. That's actually something I mentioned on the podcast. I wasn't sure if they could or not, but I still don't think they can pivot to point away from the ship. The offensive loadout is completed by 6 missile racks, providing long-range engagement to end battles early or draw foes in towards the main turret. Hope the cockpit is having the pilots be suspended because that looks dope. This looks sick. This is such a cool looking cockpit. It's got like kind of Pillar of Autumn energy, but smaller. I love all of the cockpits that have this kind of sitting over empty space vibe to them. I think the Hammerhead does that too. I like that though. Each turret hardpoint can be manned by a dedicated crew member, allowing the pilot to focus solely on flying while gunners maintain pinpoint accuracy. When operating with smaller crew, the pilot can take direct control of the wing turrets, ensuring no defensive position is left unmanned. During quieter moments, crew members can relax in their own private bunks, with onboard living amenities providing comfort and convenience no matter where the Paladin is deployed. So this is a long-distance ship. This is a long-distance combat running ship that is not focused on taking things back with them. So, I mean, maybe you could get like a couple of boxes in here into the suit locker room, but really this looks like the kind of ship that you are using. I mean, this could potentially be a bounty hunting ship if you're not taking people back. But this is a hardcore mercenary quest running ship for 3 to 4 people, I think. And it's probably going to be the kind of ship that you want the whole crew to be able to go out and take on the missions too. Like, this is really good for likely doing like mercenary missions in star systems that you're not spawning in. Long distance, you might need to stay out there for several hours or a couple of days, log on and off a few times, and just rack up kills. Rocinante then? I don't know. Originally, I think it was the Hammerhead that was most like the Rocinante. Maybe this is now. I don't know that ship that well. Although I do have it tattooed on my arm, so maybe I should. It's the new Redeemer they will nerf. No, I think the Redeemer was changed specifically to go back to what it was supposed to be. I think the Redeemer was made to fit a role that it wasn't made for, and they finally were able to make a ship that they changed the Redeemer to fit into, so now they're changing it back. At least that's I think what it seems like. Why beds and no cargo? Honestly, I don't know about the no cargo. I would assume this ship should at least be able to do like 4 SCU. I'm surprised that I think it's 2 SCU. No, it's 0. Like, you should probably allow people to take some loot. If they're running bunkers in this mission, if they're doing some FPS missions, the no SCU in this makes the ship itself feel like it's just meant to run ship combat missions. In which case, I kind of agree with you. Why do I want beds? Am I running like kind of a mini Polaris situation where I am just patrolling a star system and taking on ship battles, but I'm not really going and doing anything else? Because I could, you know, if that's how it is, then cool. Maybe this is your perfect ship patrol, your patrol gunboat to go around in Castra or the Nyx system and look for some quick battles to get into with a couple of friends. But then you're also looking at the idea of the turret being on the bottom, which emphasizes possibly ground assaults. And then you're like, well, if you're doing ground assaults, you need something to carry the loot back in, which would maybe make this more of a support ship than anything. Maybe you're bringing in a Valkyrie, dropping out the ground crew on the Valkyrie, and this guy is hovering in the ground, hovering in the air over top, keeping cover, watching for anybody coming in as backup. I see some uses for a ship like this. In fact, I think the fact that it doesn't have the cargo maybe is purposeful to fit it into that role, you know, to make it more of a piece that goes into an overall group of ships rather than a ship that does it on its own. It makes more sense to run this in a group with the Valkyrie than to have this also act as a ship that can drop people off. Kind of dig that. You feel like the power plant and coolers are undersized for its purpose? What are we looking at here? I don't even see they don't have the component specs on here. I have to download the spec page to get the components. Okay, we've got two size 2 coolers. That's not bad. And what else was there? Shield generator, 1 size 3 shield generator. Oh, sorry, I was thinking 2 size 2 shields. I might actually prefer 2 size 2 shields to 1 size 3, but that definitely means that the engineer is going to be a little bit more important. 2 size 3s maybe even could make sense. I could see it being in between 1 size 3 and 2 size 3s though. Yeah, I would say that just emphasizes the importance of having crew And that might be the sort of small thing that they would do. Like, these are the nuances that might come into making these ships. You say to yourself, well, we know that this ship will work well with 2 people, but we kind of want to make sure that more people are using this in higher numbers. So you make it so that the components require an engineer to be more readily available. But at the same time, that also sounds like you're just undergunning and underspeccing the ship. Maybe it'll get buffed at some point. Maybe it will. Or maybe this is so that it doesn't get nerfed. Like, maybe that's its downside. You know, everybody thinks this thing will get nerfed because of its guns. Maybe its weakness is just its shields. It's highly gunned, not as highly shielded. Maybe the armor is good because it's coming from Anvil. There are places where they could fit this in just based on the specs they've given it, but who knows if they will. I don't know, I kind of dig it. And I went into this talk, I think, thinking a little bit that it might be under-specced to be able to do certain things. And there's a lot of hopium mixed in here. It's dripping out of my ears right now. I'm really hoping that they are actually honing in on these nuances. The fact that this doesn't have cargo, I would think that that is a very purposeful thing to do, so that this requires another ship to go. So that you treat this thing as a support craft as well as being a patrol boat, if you will. And I'm hoping that's the way it is. But just like with a lot of Star Citizen, we won't know for a while.